Andy, my dude, have you heard of the magical website builder known as Squarespace?
Ugh, not another Squarespace ad. I feel like every podcast is sponsored by them.
Hey, don't knock it till you try it. Yes, okay, it is overhyped, but actually it lives up to the hype. Squarespace is like a website fairy godmother. With a click of a button, your site transforms into a beautiful masterpiece.
A website fairy godmother? That sounds interesting. What makes it so magical?
Well, for starters, those slick templates make anyone look like a professional web designer. Pick one, customize the colors and fonts to match your brand, and voila. Plus, the drag and drop fluid engine is so easy, your grandma could build a site on Squarespace.
Well, she did knit me a lovely scarf last Christmas. Maybe website design is next.
Exactly. And when you're ready to sell your Nana's handmade scarves online, Squarespace has built-in e-commerce. Add a store with one click. Get flexible payment options. Then watch those sales roll in. And when she wants to teach others her steezy scarf skills, Squarespace's new courses feature is just the ticket. Nana can set up her curriculum and enrollments and payments in a snap and become the next e-knitting influencer.
Oh, wow, you really sold me with the grandma angle. Sign me up for that free trial.
Just go to thenextreel.com/Squarespace and transform your site into a beautiful Squarespace masterpiece.
Well, thanks, Pete. Even though it's overhyped, Squarespace actually sounds perfect for Nana's site's needs. Appreciate the warning on the ads, though. I'll brace myself next time I listen to a podcast.
Anytime. Let me know if you need any help getting that site up and running. Andy, can you believe we've almost hit 700 episodes of The Next Reel?
I know, it's crazy. And with all the other episodes in our family of podcasts, we are well over 1,200 episodes of movie conversation. It's really pretty amazing that we've gotten to have these in-depth movie chats every week for over a decade now.
And we couldn't have done it without our loyal community of film fans. Their support over the years has meant so much.
For sure. That reminds me, we should give the merch store a shout out. Buying shirts from thenextreel.com/merch is a great way listeners can continue to support the show. Plus, they get to sport our great designs.
Absolutely. I think sometimes folks forget we have a variety of shirts, mugs, phone cases, and more available. In fact, a great place to start is with a shirt sporting the Next Reel's logo.
We also have that classic Fast Times Spicoli Surf School tee, or the weirdly popular Rusty's European Tour shirt.
The one from National Lampoon's European Vacation. Why is that so popular?
Search me, but we have sold a ridiculous number of those. I guess there are a lot of Rustys taking trips to Europe?
We're always adding new designs based on movies we've covered, like our brand new design for a streetcar named Desire, featuring a streetcar named Desire. So if you want to rep your love of TNR and films, head to thenextreel.com/merch.
Every purchase helps us continue to have these weekly in-depth conversations. So visit thenextreel.com/merch today.
And as always, thanks for listening and being a part of the Next Reel community. We've got lots more great movie chats coming your way. I'm Pete Wright.
And I'm Andy Nelson.
Welcome to the Next Reel. When the movie ends,
our conversation begins.
Lake Placid is over. Betty White, what have you done? What have you done?
It has existed since prehistoric times. It was worshipped by primitive cultures. It can kill a man with one crushing bite.
We heard a man was bit in half.
Any recent bear attacks?
Bears don't attack people underwater.
Probably a fever then.
What was that?
Whatever's out there being shot with this, he's dead.
Oh no.
Sheriff, how many deputies you got?
You came here to help you find it.
We can't let him kill it.
Experience a few parts mystery.
Do you have any theories why he's here?
Honestly, I don't know.
And a few parts missing.
It's a human toe.
Is this the man who was killed? He seemed taller.
Oh my God.
Bill Pullman.
Shoot him! No!
How much of a wacko is this guy? Bridget Fonda.
Mother!
Oliver Platt.
Maybe he swam back up! Maybe not.
I just have this feeling everything's totally safe.
This summer, the Earth's oldest creature has just found a new home. Lake Placid.
She's saucy, that Betty.
Oh, she's so saucy. Now, Andy, I wonder if you were looking to find out what your grandmother was feeding the animals, where would you go?
You know, my grandmother was a big fan of letterbox.com. She would go to every movie that talked about feeding or just like the big animals, the creature features, and she would talk about all the animals she fed in her posts and in everybody's conversations over there. So that's where
she reviewed a lot of big animal movies. Is that true?
Oh,
she's a big.
Yeah. My childhood was living big animal movies. It's like growing up in the circus.
You have this image of you just living in like a crazy old taxidermist house.
Except they're all alive.
It's kind of a cross. It's a cross between Lake Placid and Coraline. It's just full of giant animals.
Giant animals with button eyes. Yes.
Right.
They were my play friends. Exactly. Yes, interesting conversations that we had. But yes, head over to letterbox.com/thenextreel. You can see all of the stuff we're talking about and all the movies we talk about and get in with the conversation with us over there.
Okay, Lake Placid, Andy. I have to admit, I've been looking forward to this one. I feel like when we watched all the other ones, my sense memory was set, and I knew what I was getting into with all these movies. And I had this very high, we'll say, just sort of memory opinion of Lake Placid. I'm wondering how, like, what you brought into this movie. Like, what was the sort of your emotional state when you started watching this movie?
Well, I don't know if you recall, but it did pop up on Letterboxd not that long ago that I had actually recently watched this again.
Yeah.
Because I really enjoy this movie. It's, I guess, based on the general popularity of it, I may have to call it a guilty pleasure. I find it to be just a hoot. I think that the people are clearly having fun with it. And, is it a great movie? Maybe not, but I sure have a lot of fun watching this one. So, yeah, this was just earlier this year, back in February, I watched it. And yeah, I have a ton of fun. So, and I had just as much fun on my recent watch as I did back in February. And yeah, maybe I'm the audience for it.
Well, that has become clear just in the last 35 seconds. That's exactly now what I expected.
Yeah, I'm taking it. You did not walk away with the joy that I did.
I feel like we have to talk about it because honestly, I'm not coming at this with like just ragey hot takes, right? This movie on this watch confused me more than ever. I honestly don't know where to put my feelings for this movie because I watch it and there are pieces of it that give me great joy and I find really fun. And then I just wonder if I'm not being gaslit a little bit about this movie, that in fact it is actually terrible and I need to wake up. So we'll talk about it. But first, I think Andy, we have to start, if we're going to be in a series about aquatic killers, we has to start with the aquatic killer of the movie and the now weekly ranking, stack ranking, the aquatic killer catalog that we've talked about so far. Now, so far we have the octopus from Tentacles. We have the piranha from Piranha with some government intervention.
A little bit.
There. We have the absurdly long anaconda from Anaconda. And now the great saltwater crocodile. The large and hypercarnivorous apex predator in Lake Placid.
Specifically, I believe it's determined to be like an Indo-Pacific crocodile,
yes.
Right? It is
according
to the shape of its scales.
According to the shape of its scales, yes. I don't know much from scale shapes, but I do know it's really long. And then I read up a little bit on the saltwater crocodile, and I read things like this. The saltwater crocodile is a large and opportunistic hypercarnivorous apex predator. It ambushes most of its prey and then drowns or swallows it whole. It is capable of prevailing over almost any animal that enters its territory, including the apex predators such as sharks and varieties of freshwater or saltwater fish, including pelagic species, invertebrates such as crustaceans, various reptiles, birds, and mammals, including humans. So far, Andy, in that list, this thing eats sharks, probably octopuses, piranha, and anacondas. So
and humans, according to the list.
And humans. It seems like this thing is already pretty serious. Now, in the movie, the land shark is 32 feet. The model that Stan Winston is 32 feet long. Did it need to be 32 feet to be terrifying? They don't really grow beyond 21 feet in the wild, and we can talk about that in a second. Did it need to be quite this big at 32 feet? I couldn't tell what 21 feet is versus 32 feet in a shark eating what this movie could have been like. You could have laid this out with just hungry crocodile in the water, not a massive crocodile in the water. So I don't know. I feel like this one right now, it probably has it for me as the scariest threat.
Yeah, it definitely is. I mean, it's pretty creepy. The idea of these things being so big, and I mean, it's also a trend of these movies. And I think we can look at Jaws as a sign that this was definitely a thing to come, is that, what, if you're going to do this, we're going to make it even bigger. Because even in Jaws, they look at that and they're like, that's bigger than any shark I've ever seen. And same thing in Anaconda and Piranha, they're huge. I mean, they're always bigger and more abnormally sized than they should be. And even last time, the Anaconda was more like what was the name of it? It was
Titanoboa.
Titanoboa, yeah. I feel like the size of this crocodile, yes, it's abnormally large, but it ends up being kind of going back to kind of more of a prehistoric creature size, or it's just unexplainably large. It's not determined as to how it ever got here, but it's big. It is dang big. And I mean, looking at the largest that they've been, or, that they think that they've been, I don't know if they've ever figured it out, but I mean, they've found skulls from old saltwater crocodiles, and I think the largest that they found, the head alone, if it had been detached from the body, may weigh 440 pounds by itself based on this skull. So that's a pretty big boy. So I think that there probably were some prehistoric versions of these that did get to be frighteningly large.
When you say things like big boy, like you did just now, do you notice in your head that you put a little stank on it? You've got a little spin on the ball when you do that?
Maybe a little bit, yeah.
Big boy.
Pretty big boy, yeah.
I do. The one that I got completely stuck on is Lolong, which died in captivity in February 2013. And this one was almost 21 feet. It is the largest that had been living and actually taken into captivity and died in captivity, but it's the longest on record. There are a number of reported bigger crocodiles that they've found, but haven't been able to get close enough to them to sedate them and measure them from head to tail. These things are stunningly big when you have a sense of perspective to them. The Lolong, the picture I'm looking at of it's Lolong lying on the ground sedated, and there are 7 guys like riding astride it, and they look tiny. So I feel like just this is a terrifying animal in of its own stead. I know that they're amping up things again for movies like this. The part of the satire, to make the satire work, is to have an absurdly large crocodile. I get it, but I also think this is why I'm partly conflicted here. This could have been a very different and much, I think, arguably more interesting movie if it was taken, if they actually took it a little bit more seriously. And I don't feel like I've seen, maybe, can you think of a crocodile attacks movie like Dingo Ate My Baby or something like that,
I wish they took this more seriously. I feel like just hearing you say that, I kind of lost track of everything you were saying because it's like, I don't know how many people say that about these creature attack movies.
I know, but wouldn't
like,
that be
did they
cool?
say that? I wish that Steven Spielberg really took the reality of great white sharks more seriously when he made that film.
Okay, you're making me sound ridiculous. This is on you. I think it was fine leading up to that. I watched this movie and I think, okay, I get the camp. I get it. It's fine. The crocodile is really big. Also, I'm scared to death of crocodiles, like these giant slimy lizards that are hunting me, because that's what they do, apparently, is they stalk and hunt you. And that's might be just enough for me in the movie. And I don't need the campy stuff. It could just be scary. That's all I'm saying.
There was, I don't know if I'd call it any more serious than anything else. I mean, it's hard to say, you know, which one of these is really more serious and takes it seriously. But there was an Australian film named Dark Age from 1987 that listener of the show, Nick Langdon, pointed out. And I watched it also earlier in the year. And it's a show about, you know, in the Australian outback where a guide is trying to track this giant crocodile that's eating some of the locals. And it definitely goes down the road of kind of cheesy creature feature at times. But at the same time, it does feel like as it builds to an end, it actually felt a little more serious, which was kind of interesting, a little like more along the line of conservation and stuff. So I was like, oh, okay, I wasn't expecting it to kind of go down that road. Mm-hmm. So that's something that certainly might be kind of worth looking into. But I think largely, you're not finding a lot of that, the serious take on. I mean, I think I'd have to go to something like The Revenant just to look at the bear attack.
Yes.
But the movie's not about bears attacking. It's not, you know, this bear attacked and now we have to get away. It's an element of the film, but it's not the film. But it's taken very seriously. And I feel like that it may be the sort of thing that you'd have to go to find that sort of take on it.
Yeah. All right. Well, anyway, this thing is scary. It's legit scary. And I think we have a movie that comes back and earns the eyes peeking up over the surface that was introduced to us in tentacles with an octopus. Now we get it for real, and it's good.
I just have to point out, we have talked about Jaws and great white sharks, and I suppose at this point we're keeping it off of our ranking until the end. We'll add that onto the list because we haven't been talking about that as we rank. So let's save that one now for the end.
You're sure?
We're this far in. Let's wait till we get to the end now, and then we'll throw it on there as a bonus for people. Okay. I did also want to say that just as far as like crocodiles themselves, well, one, this movie specifically is a saltwater crocodile. It's not the freshwater crocodiles, which are much smaller. They are not nearly to be as terrified of.
Like what, 8 to 10 feet, right?
Yeah,
12 feet maybe?
Exactly. Like
much
they wouldn't attack a person. They might bite you if you're like, you know, poking it or things like that, but it's not going to try to eat you. Something like this would.
We went to, this is one of the weirdest, we went to Costa Rica several years ago, and we're driving across a bridge, and the bridge is packed with people. And you look over the bridge, and it's like there's no fences, no nothing, but there are hundreds of crocodiles down there, like just in the basin, in the muddy basin of the bridge, and they're all the shorter ones. They looked at just as threatening.
Did you feel like it was Temple of Doom? Like,
yes, yes, and occasionally one of them would like snap, and you know, a tail would like splash. I was like, why are we here? There's no fences. Like I could walk down there and just cross under the bridge if I wanted to. I didn't.
Could you walk across them like that James Bond movie?
Or Pitfall, the video game.
Right, or that.
Anyway, let's talk about the movie.
But no, wait. Before we go too much farther, I a few more points regarding crocodiles as we're talking about them. There, our crocodile hunter who shows up, Oliver Platt's character, Hector, who is this mythology professor, this rich guy who is hunting these crocs, or really just kind of like trying to study them, I suppose. He brings up a few points. He says that there are cultures who deify crocodiles. That actually is true. There are cultures who do deify crocodiles. I couldn't find anything about the Melanesia people who kind of view it as this, this test where if you can survive the crocodile, then it's being the final judge, blah, blah, blah. I didn't see anything about like that, although I didn't dig too deep. Maybe there are some myths about these sorts of things with crocodiles. So I thought that was pretty interesting. But also he said that the record was a 27-foot crocodile, which I guess we've at this point proven false. So we know that there's some wishy-washy facts.
The one that I found that was reportedly larger than that is Chris the Savannah King. That's Krys. And this is one that they'd never actually found it. So this giant crocodile was shot and killed in July of 1958 in Normanton, Queensland, Australia. And it was named Chris after the person who shot it. And they have this picture of it using force perspective. So the people are standing way in the back and the crocodile is giant, and it's not great for reputation building. They claimed that it was 28 feet 4 inches, 8.64 meters. And there's actually a life-size replica of it in Normanton. But it's just so much bigger than any other of these crocodiles that they've ever found that it strains credulity. And so they're honestly, that's the crocodile when you start reading about crocodiles and you look at this story, which is satire about crocodiles getting absurdly big. That's the crocodile that I'm thinking of, right? Is this absurdly big crocodile that nobody's ever seen before. That's what the whole movie's about. So, you could say it's a biopic is what I'm trying to get to.
Well, but I think, fishermen, it speaks to the world of people bringing these sorts of things forward. Because also there was one that was shot in 1840 in the Bay of Bengal, reported at 10.1 meters or 33 feet 2 inches. So theoretically, that would be bigger than the one we have in this movie here. But then later, Guinness Book of World Records examined its skull and said that based on the skull size, it probably was only 19 feet 4 inches or 5.89 meters. So it's a hard thing to gauge. And I think people are always going to be trying to say, we found the biggest. No, we found the biggest, because there's another in Borneo that was said to be 32 feet. And so it's just, it's trying to get the proof. I guess that's what it boils down to.
Well, what treats? Please don't have them as pets. Okay.
Don't flush them down the toilet when you do, because we've seen what happens there.
Terrible things. Now, Stan Winston, I know we haven't talked about the movie yet, but as long as we're talking about the creature, I feel like the creature is pretty great.
It is really great. Stan Winston did the puppetry here. And this was a really smart methodology that director Steve Miner put forward working with Stan Winston. And it was very much kind of the Jurassic Park methodology that Stan Winston did in that film. And that is blending real puppets with CG as needed. And I found that when you see that, it ends up feeling so much more real, because there are times where you're looking at that crocodile puppet in the water, either the full body one or the head or the tail, whichever one it is, because there were those 3 puppets built. And then you blend it and you cut in with, the full body as it's kind of charging or something like that. And it just ends up working really well. Like it makes so much more sense. It feels authentic. So I really appreciate that, especially having now watched Lake Placid 2. And let me just tell you, it's all CG in that one, and it is garbage. I mean, I know that was like a straight to TV, straight to video type of movie, but so the budget was low anyway, but it just was terrible. Absolutely terrible.
That's too bad. That's totally predictable, but too bad. I think the effect is great. I think the final it's a little bit frustrating when we get to the final scene in the movie, because I feel like the rest of the movie, they do such a great job of both concealing the crocodile as they're fighting it, and then revealing it perfectly. Like when the bear attacks and the crocodile comes up out of the water, broad daylight. That's an effect that in 1999 would not have been easy to pull off with exclusively CG. And to have all of those elements, both real and CG assist, working alongside one another, I think the puppets are incredible, really dynamic.
And funny story about that scene, they brought in a bear and I'm not sure if it was Bart the bear. I think Bart the bear may have been dead by then. I can't remember. But anyway, they brought in a bear to film, and the bear saw the 32-foot hydraulic crocodile right there, and the bear ran away. It was smart enough to know, you know what? I'm not messing with that thing. They could not get the bear. Amazing. They could not get the bear to come back to film with it. It was
Bears
too
are so
scared,
smart.
Right? They actually ended up having to put this giant crocodile underwater just so they could get the bear to come onto the set.
Oh my God, that's amazing.
I think that is so funny.
Isn't that the equivalent of like going to the dentist and seeing, okay, your dentist today will be Dave Bautista? Like, come on. Like, it's just too much. Even a bear knows. You don't want Dave Bautista's giant hands in your mouth like that. That's it. That's what I'm saying. So I feel like, Andy, we have to talk about David E. Kelley.
Okay, we're going to start with him. Let's do it. David E. Kelley, writer and producer on the film, and mostly known, I guess we could say, for his TV writing. That seems to be the larger world of his writing. Although a few years before this, he had written the screenplay for To Jillian on Her 37th Birthday. And this same year as this, he also wrote Mystery Alaska. But TV, you're a TV fan of his, right? Ally McBeal.
And that is why I want to talk about this. David E. Kelley. This he's a Hollywood dream, right? He's a dumb country lawyer who makes good. When I say that, I mean he went to Princeton and Boston University School of Law, so he schlepped his way through law school. And then he wrote a screenplay, and he goes and gets famous. And now he is one of the very few screenwriters and showrunners to have shows that have aired and been successful and popular on all four major U.S. television networks, ABC, CBS, Fox, and NBC. I knew him from Boston Legal and Boston Public and Ally McBeal and The Practice. We kind of stopped watching David E. Kelley shows around Chicago Hope. It just didn't really take off, and missed Picket Fences, but we're big LA Law fans. So pretty much the law shows, we were big into the David E. Kelley law shows.
I was going to say, and he did Big Little Lies, which was the one that I remember, current. A recent one. And well, I think it ended. Right. Or I don't know if they're doing anymore.
They're in, I don't know if they're going anymore. But
and then Mr. Mercedes, a Stephen King one.
Yes, that's right. Absolutely right. And so, he has a certain tone that he was known for, particularly in the legal stuff. Like when I watch episodes, and I haven't watched all of Big Little Lies, but I watch that show and I don't get a sense that I'm watching a David E. Kelley show, right? Not in the same way that I feel like I'm watching a
Aaron Sorkin.
What's his name? Aaron Sorkin show, right? The guy is inseparable from the language that he writes. I think David E. Kelley was more inseparable for the kinds of characters he creates, and he created some crazy characters in those shows, right? The legal shows in particular. They were great. I mean, just a great character guy. So I come into looking at his movies with that kind of expectation. It is similar to thinking about my expectations of like Joss Whedon going into Cabin in the Woods. You know what I mean? Like there is a certain sense that I know kind of what I'm going to get. And I feel like Cabin in the Woods paid off for me, right? In a big way. It was that sort of filmmaker sandwich. I know what I'm getting and I'm satisfied with the result. It made good on the promises of, the identity of the past work. I really, really enjoyed it. This movie, I feel like he's trying to do something different. He's trying to make something that's a little bit more satirical in a genre that is not his native. And that's why it moves in and out of working for me. What I love about what he's done here, characters like the rich industrialist who wants to swim with crocodiles and lands on a helicopter, great identity piece. Betty White in general, great. I really like the whole fish and game relationship. I think all of that is really great. He writes those characters in a kind of David E. Kelley way, but then he puts them in this place and with the words coming out of their mouths that just they feel distant. They don't feel whole and of a piece. They feel like they're reaching for satire in a way that is often off kilter for me. And that, I wonder, is that a David E. Kelley problem? Is it a Steve Miner problem? What is the problem that I have with the tone and tonality of this movie?
That's interesting because I guess I never looked at it as a satire. Like for me, it always struck me as, and they even talk about this, but it felt like kind of a comedy horror, which certainly is a thing. And Steve Miner's worked in that realm before. You know, we've talked to him, we've talked about some of the stuff that he's done, and kind of that's his preferred realm to be in, rather than kind of the Friday the 13th stuff that he had been in. It's more that house type of property that fits his kind of the tone that he's looking for. And then they were looking to do something that just was really kind of just a campy fun. And I feel like, I don't know, I felt like they struck that perfectly. Now, I do think that there are some script issues, the way that David E. Kelley chose to write his characters in such broad strokes, where it's like, sometimes I watch these characters and I wonder, is he playing these stereotypes just far too far?
I think that's the question, though. And isn't that kind of a statement on what he's trying to do? Like, when you write these characters way out of bounds from their expectations, it's like, there's got to be some sort of, you're doing that for a reason, right? What kind of point are you making with the way with the words he puts in them? They're absurd.
Well, I guess that's the thing is, I didn't see it that they were trying to make a point on it. I just felt like he was just doing it because they thought it would be a fun way to write the characters. And maybe that's the problem.
Like a stylistic choice.
Yeah, maybe that's the problem, is that he wrote them so broadly that it feels like, well, there must be a point for him to be doing it like this. Because certainly a lot of people have more problems with this than I do. The way that they are so incredibly broad, especially I think the major culprit in the film is Bridget Fonda's character, who is so over the top to a point where it's like, this is ridiculous. There must be a reason that he wrote her this way, as a person who has written much stronger female characters in his TV properties, right? And so that's, I think, where there ends up being this line that maybe it's just he wasn't sure how far to take it, and so he just wrote them this way, and Miner directed them this way, and they play this way. The actors perform them this way, and it's all done this way just to try hitting that kind of that zone of that comedy horror. And maybe it was at a point where, especially post Scream in '96, that horror movies started pushing into new territory, because they had already started moving into this meta nature, and it was almost like these were old school people who missed the boat.
That's an interesting way to look at it, actually. I think that is that makes a lot of sense. I think Bridget Fonda is, I have trouble with that. But my question was, watching it, is it a performative thing? Is it just that Bridget Fonda wasn't able to connect with the words on the page?
Oh, I don't think so at all. Like, I think she really connects well with the words on the page. I think she delivers it all in the character, and it works in context of the character. But then the question is, but is it too much? Is it far too much when she says things like, what was it? Like, oh, I'm trying to find the lines that she has. She's got some lines like, I don't do mosquitoes and things like that, or whatever.
Oh.
Where it's just like, especially as we learn with a character who, as a kid, would spend time like at her grandmother's house on the lake. So it's like, she obviously, had that in her life when she was younger. And now it's so over the top and broad as to like city girl country setting. And everybody's going to just make a point of it, to the point where it's nonsense.
Forgive the profanity, but things like, thank you, it's so rewarding to imagine my tax dollar finding its way to you,
Well, that would be Betty White. That would not be...
it was quoted. It's quoted in the script originally as hers, right? She was hers.
Are you sure?
I'm reading it, Kelley Scott.
Because that's totally Betty White who says that.
Yeah, I know. And if you go back to Mrs. Bickerman, she actually says, she has some pretty good lines.
Oh, I'm sure.
No, because what she says is murders and rapes in the city, people bomb planes. Can the people stop them? No, but feed one little cow to a crocodile. The sheriff says, you're going to stay here until the police show. You're under full house arrest. And she says, thank you, officer. That's her line.
Right.
First of all, that profanity is just, it's you're just taking two words and you're putting them together. It is uninspired profanity. And so I find that those kinds of things feel to me like you're doing something that's so obviously ridiculous sounding that you have to have a point, and I never get the point. I never really grasp the point. I have a lot of fun with the slashing, with the animal horror stuff. I have a lot of fun with that. We got to talk about that opening sequence when the diver goes down and comes back up as half of a diver is awesome. Mwah.
Yeah.
Those sorts of things are great.
And I mean, but I think you're going to find that sort of stuff throughout, right? Because that's a fantastic scene. While the diver's underwater dealing with the beavers / the crocodile, you also have our wonderful small county sheriff sitting on the boat eating Twinkies. Yeah. And so, I mean, there's a lot of that sort of that over the top stereotyping that they do in this film with these characters. And it does get to a point where it's a little much. And I guess to that end, I just feel like it was by a writer and director who were enjoying kind of playing with all of the tropes that went along with it. But again, I think that time had passed. And especially now when you're looking at it 21 years after the film had been released, it feels even more dated when you watch these characters, and it does end up hurting the film.
Yeah, I think it does. I think when you remove any of that material as dated, what's left is honestly what I got the most joy out of, which was the animal horror stuff, which I thought was fun. But yeah, I think it's kind of late 1990s self-awareness that just doesn't play as well for me.
Well, I mean, that's all of what it is. Like the reason, even just the setup to get her there, the fact that there's an affair going on, the whole thing, that whole setup feels a little rough, right? With her boyfriend running the place.
Mariska Hargitay and Adam Arkin, man, they really saved those scenes.
I mean, they're fine in it, but still, it comes in being like, well, that was an odd way to deal with all of that. And then also you have these screenplay transitions where you have Bridget Fonda saying, I'm not going to Maine. And then you cut to her on the plane to Maine. And I feel like this had been a trope in screenplays long before this rolled around. And I just felt like, okay, that was dated already by the time you used that here. Yeah, so maybe it's just David E. Kelley, the transition to writing an actual screenplay, that kind of that taut 2 hour, or in this case, 82 minutes or whatever it is, very short script and that many pages, it's just a harder thing for him to put together, maybe. I don't know.
Well, you know what I would submit on behalf of David E. Kelley is that he is a writer who writes so perilously on the razor's edge of timeliness that his work becomes dated maybe more quickly than others of the same ilk. Because we went back and watched some Ally McBeal not too long ago, and kind of had the same feeling about the way he wrote, in particular, the way he wrote Ally's character was, it was fine when we watched it, 25 years ago. It's less fine now. It doesn't hold up. The jokes don't hold up. In many areas, it just doesn't quite stick the landing as you'd expect. And I think it just might be maybe because he is one of his special gifts is that he can write, so well timed to the era.
And I think that there's something to that, because when you're doing that for TV and it kind of has that life where it's kind of living with people over the course of years, I think it can feel like it's fitting in with them more because it kind of evolves with them over the years that the show is playing. Whereas in a film, it's this point in time that hits, not to mention the fact that it was written likely several years beforehand. Right. it gets made, it gets released. I mean, there's already a chunk of time by the time it's hitting the screens and people are watching it, where it could potentially already have fallen out of favor in its style. And then you're looking at it that many years later, and it is a hard thing to kind of hold up.
Yeah.
But that being said, there are things that do work in here. Like everything that happens between Oliver Platt and Brendan Gleeson, I just love. Like those two characters, I think are hilarious. And when they're butting heads, it just like everything works. Like nothing feels dated there. And that's, I think, the line is that I think he had easier times with certain characters than others.
I wonder if it's just he has an easier time writing male characters too.
Well, Bill Pullman, I mean, he's fine in the movie, but his character is kind of flat. Like there's not a lot to. I mean, I like him. His character's fine, but it's not an exciting character.
Well, no, but I don't think he's written as a peak character, right? That's Oliver Platt, right? He's
sure.
the crazy outsider. We need a grounded character, right?
Yeah, which he certainly is. In the context, though, of like our leading man, I guess I'd say he's the leading man.
Yeah, I guess.
I don't know. Or maybe I wouldn't. Maybe I would say that Brendan Gleeson, he's the one we start with, and he's the one who shoots the last croc. I mean, maybe he's the leading man. I don't know. It's an interesting dilemma that they're running into here. Like, who's really the lead?
Well, so Brendan Gleeson takes the final shot, but Bill Pullman gets in the car with Bridget Fonda, and they drive off into the dark.
They do, which also just felt very cliche and to a certain extent unearned, but
wildly on all counts. But that's just what makes me come back to him as leading man. He might not have been leading man material in this movie, but only because he was just written poorly.
Well, but that's the struggle of the script, and maybe that's the struggle with David E. Kelley. Is he's a TV writer. There's a lot of characters, and here it's like I think there was some disconnect between who's the lead in the Croc story and then who's the lead in the love story, and it generally in most movies would be the same person, but it doesn't have to be. But it was like Bill Pullman just didn't feel like he had a lot other than trying to organize stuff at the end. It really did feel like Brendan Gleeson was kind of more the protagonist. The more I think about it, I'm settled on that. And then just, that Bill Pullman just gets the girl. But I mean, what's he doing at the end?
What's he doing there? Yes.
He organizes, I guess, all the trucks and stuff to do the whole big trapping thing at the end. So I guess he kind of puts that into play and they do trap him. But then that largely accidentally falls to Oliver Platt. I guess the shot with the dart came from Bill Pullman. I don't know. It's a little bit of a mess as far as that.
Yeah, you're trying to unpack an enormously confusing and rather anemic climactic battle with the crocodile that I was not engaged emotionally. There were so many other moments that elicited a more genuine fear and intensity, and this was not it. I don't know if it's because we actually revert back to a lot more CG and it doesn't look great. It's the anaconda factor.
By the time we get here, the crocodile ends up feeling slower. Like when she gets knocked into the water, this is Kelley, Bridget Fonda's character, because it comes up onto land and it's like chasing people around, and Bill Pullman distracts it, and the croc turns, hits her with its tail, and she goes flying into the water, and then the croc chases after her, and she swims to the crashed helicopter where Oliver Platt is, and she's swimming. The croc, we know, they move pretty fast on land and even faster in the water, and for some reason they've now established that crocodiles don't see very well underwater, and it kind of like misses her because she hides behind a tree underwater. Even though it's night in a dark, murky lake, she manages to see and find a tree to hide behind. And the croc, it's like it's moving so slow, like she's manages to get all the way there without getting caught. And I don't quite click with that. I struggle with that a little bit, the fact that that's how that played out.
They can swim at 15 to 18 miles per hour, and they can, let's see where they run. But 15 to 18 miles per hour is pretty quick when you're swimming.
How fast does a human swim?
Like if you were dressed wearing your hiking boots. A short fin mako shark, 6 miles per hour. That's Michael Phelps topped out around that in 2010 at 6 miles per hour.
And the croc
Michael Phelps.
The croc was more than
15 to
almost,
18.
Yeah, 2.5 to 3 times.
Yeah.
That speed. Yeah. Now, I suppose you could argue the larger you are, the more cumbersome you are. It's harder for you to move, but once you're moving, it's then harder to slow down because of the mass. But I'm not sure that's the reason that they had it.
Feel like
Yeah.
If you're going down that road, you've already lost.
Right.
It's also like a 2,000-pound, log with teeth.
Right. Yeah.
So I don't, that whole thing at the end where she is able to dodge it by when it turns sideways and opens its mouth and eats it's like you do that to puppies, that kind of trick.
Well, and also, like, I've always heard, and this is some more scientific stuff I'm sure we could find, but the strength of a crocodile is when it's closing its jaw. Like, when it closes that jaw, it's going to crush whatever is between its two sets of jaw bones. And the weakness is when it's trying to open. And that's why it's easier to tie their mouth shut, because it's really hard for them to open it. But closing, like, I have a feeling with that tree branch underwater, it would snap that tree branch in a heartbeat and her.
Yeah.
I'm just speculating.
It would splinter it. I just have to imagine. So there are problems with the end, but this is nitpicky stuff. But it's the nitpicky stuff that it kind of sucks any emotional intensity out of the movie. I didn't get the jokes because we've established they were written too timely because David E. Kelley, and the asterisk, and the final sequence of the movie is not a compelling. It's an incredibly confusing trap that they sold, that they don't have a good consistent sense of visual narrative. I just don't. Like, it's just a crocodile wandering in circles.
Well, yeah, and I felt like there were probably better ways to do it. It didn't, like, I wasn't supremely disappointed in it like you were. I felt like, you know what, it's an entertaining end. There's a cow dangling in the water. Like, there were things that made me laugh, and it still kind of holds, and it plays pretty well. I actually have a good time with the end, and the surprise of the second croc is fun. And we didn't even mention that. I was listening to our anaconda episode. I'm like, we never mentioned that there were 2 anacondas that they're dealing with, because they kill one at the waterfall, and then they have to deal with the other one. Anyway, that's another thing that is kind of this thing that we're seeing pop up in these movies, is that, it's not just one, there were 2. But I did want to just come back. There were some jokes that work, and that's my asterisk, because I did like all of the sarcasm jokes that the sheriff makes. Like, there were some things that I felt held up a lot better than stuff about really particularly Fonda's character.
And I would add, Betty White is a national treasure.
She is the funniest part of this movie.
She's 100%. The funniest part of this movie, and honestly, I don't know. It's possible that whatever you give her, she could save it just because of her, because she is what she is.
It's entirely possible.
But her delivery of Kelley's words, I think, were great, and whatever improv she did, I'm sure she did some. But my goodness, it was. She's fantastic, and it's a rather predictable, I think, final sequence when we discover that she's sort of behind it because she's been feeding these things, and we get the coda at the end with the little baby crocodiles, and that's just, I mean, that it's all Betty White. Nibble those toes, babies. It's just so great.
Certainly an element that came up more in the sequels, because the second one, it was like her sister or something like that, played by Cloris Leachman. It became a thing to have the Bickermans as a part of the story, and like all of this stuff, which is interesting because I buy it when she says here, and I think that the screenwriters, like everybody involved, bought it, that they just happened upon this crocodile and just took it under their wing and raised it from a baby in this lake, or the crocodiles. And like, I guess I didn't think that they actually put them here, but I guess now that I think about it, maybe they did.
She was great. Can we talk about Gleason just a little bit? Does he feel just a touch overpowered for this movie?
By star quality, you mean?
Yeah, and just by like classic delivery. He felt, I couldn't tell if this was one for the check. Or if he was just like trying to build his career. Well,
I mean, this was 99 Brendan Gleeson.
Yeah.
Like, I have to look back at his filmography to see what was he doing around this time. He had done The General right before, which was a big name, a big film for him. This Is My Father, Sweetie Barrett, all like leading up to this. Then My Life So Far and Mission Impossible 2 right afterward. I feel like, he was at a point where I think he was, Braveheart was a few years before, but he was very much kind of a supporting character. Michael Collins, same thing. I don't really think that he kind of pushed onto the forefront until much later. I feel like he was just a supporting actor. Maybe that I'm not thinking of some more small independent projects he'd been on, but I found him to be more of a bit player. And it wasn't until, it was films like The General around this time that was like his film, but it was a smaller property.
Well, what it made me think of was that, is it possible that this was made, far enough before it was released that this was one of those cusp films for him that maybe he wouldn't have taken had it been offered it to him 2 years later? Because it just felt to me, the very first Twinkie he ate was like, oh God, Brendan, what have you done? It just felt like he's just, this is not Calvary.
No, it's definitely not. But I don't know. I felt like everybody in it, regardless of their stature, like I felt like they knew it was going to be just kind of a campy horror comedy film. And I don't think they were pushing to get anything more out of it. And maybe that's to its fault, right? It could be just part of the problem is that people weren't pushing to do anything more with this. I don't know. Yeah. I find myself conflicted. Let's see. You want to talk about getting it made? There were a few things in kind of the approach that Miner and Kelley. This was something I think David E. Kelley had been wanting to do something like this and ended up bumping into Steve Miner, and they talked about it and thought it would be a lot of fun. And so they worked on it, and Miner really wanted to make sure that it looked good. So talked to Stan Winston, who was so excited about the proposition that he actually started working right away on spec. He ended up spending over $1 million of his own money to develop this giant puppet. And then they were able to use that to kind of pitch to investors so they could get the funds. So I thought that was pretty great. To film this, they actually scouted some lakes and stuff, but found it too difficult to film in real lakes with the puppet and everything that they wanted to do. So they actually built in their own tank. It was a 1.5 million gallon tank. They built this basically whole set with the lakeside, everything up in Canada. It was, they built the trees. They brought in these 80 to 100 foot trees to place around it, built all the beaches, everything all around it so they could kind of manage the entire thing themselves, which was hard because with all the trees, the shrubs, everything that they added, I mean, they had to keep it all alive for I think it was 7 months or something from the time they started building it to the time they were tearing it down. It was a long period of time. And plus they were filming in the cold. It was Vancouver in November, and they ended up calling it the Godforsaken Tank of Doom, which I think is pretty funny.
Fantastic.
Yeah, but it made for working with a puppet in the water, a big hydraulic puppet, a lot easier. All the underwater stuff they filmed in a tank in California, but everything on the surface they filmed at this thing, except for stuff like where you could see the actual lake, like Betty White's farm. That was at a real lake somewhere up in Canada. I can't remember where, but in that area. And so, so I think they fake it pretty well because honestly, I just assumed that it was all filmed at a lake. Like I never once bought that any of these shots along the shore were a set.
Totally. And credit to, Darren Okada and to editing team, Marshall Harvey and Paul Hirsch, because that is the first thing I thought when I realized there was so much tank work apart from
and John Willett, production designer.
Yeah, right. Because apart from the underwater stuff, which I just assumed was tank work, there's nothing that makes it seem like it's not one single lake the entire time.
Right.
It looks great.
Right. It's a little fantastical. They say that they're in, I can't remember the name of the county, but I think it's the northernmost county in Maine where it is supposed to take place, which they say the lake is supposed to be about a mile away from the ocean. According to the maps, the corner of this county to the ocean is about an hour away. So it's a little farther away. I don't know if you're going to get a saltwater lake quite so far inland. I would buy it if it was only an hour from the ocean, but a mile from the ocean. But 60 miles, I have a harder time buying that's a saltwater lake that far inland.
But wait a minute. That at some point in the script, he says that's part of the mystery of this crocodile is that it's actually in a freshwater lake, but it's a saltwater crocodile. I'm not finding any of that.
I didn't find that.
That's a Mandela thing for me.
Because you had the sheriff talking about how they can't swim in salt water. And Oliver Platt's character is just, he says something like, "Oh, well, don't tell the crocodile," or something, some cheeky line. Right. And so I felt like that, it was an odd line to throw in there because it's like, well, most crocodiles are saltwater, but who knows?
Interesting.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that was as soon as they said it was from Asia and they swims across, and then Oliver Platt, whose little sidelines like that were funny, but then at some certain points kind of frustrating. Like they conceal that information in books. I'd kind of like to know how this thing got there. Like I find myself wanting to come back around to that multiple times. Like that's a mystery that I think they could have actually given us more story there. So.
Well, Pete, we could certainly continue and explore the Lake Placid series to find out more about these crocodiles.
Oh my goodness.
There are 6 of them after all. But the last thing I want to say about the effects work here, the Stan Winston's team, it's not just the crocodile that they made. That cow that's hanging from the helicopter, that was never a real cow.
What?
Like I was fooled the whole time. I thought that they hung a cow from a helicopter. That cow the whole time was a puppet. They made a puppet cow.
I have to tell you, I am so relieved at that because that was genuinely distressing for me. Is when the cow was splashing at the end, I was like, I can't watch anymore. That was the most horrific part of the movie is what they did to that cow. I'm so relieved it was a puppet.
Yeah, and it's like, wow, that was really good puppet work. They said they had all the controls for it in the copter and all the wires went down, and then they were just moving its head and legs around and making it do its thing. So I was really impressed with that.
Stan Winston, national treasure.
100%.
Oh, fantastic. Okay. Yeah. And what about the little babies at the end? Is that in a tank?
So the babies at the end they were in the actual lake where they filmed this up in Canada, and they had because they were using the lake, they had to put like a net underwater or something. No, what they did, this is what they did. They tied fishing line to each of their tails to try keeping them in line so that they could manage them effectively. They were actually baby caimans, which are a really small crocodilian species. And they had, I think, 5 or 6 of them, and 2 of them ended up getting away. They escaped into the lake. And so I just think that's funny. And I'm sure that they froze by the time actual winter rolled around there, and I doubt they could have survived. Yeah. But the realities are how funny if it had led to exactly what this story portrays, where you have these giant animals living in this lake now because idiot film crew filmed there and let them go.
Oh God, Hollywood is a snake eating its own tail. That's what it is. We talked to old Steve Miner on the show, on the Speakeasy some time ago.
We did, yeah. We had a chance to chat with him about the Philadelphia Story, one of his favorite films. He's an interesting guy. I mean, he's all over the place with his types of films. I mean, He was behind The Wonder Years.
Yep. And then, obviously, we get into the Friday 13th stuff and Halloween. Yep. That's kind of his jam. And don't forget
Been involved
Warlock.
In a lot. And Warlock, of course.
Yeah, he's such an interesting guy. Talk about a guy who contains multitudes. I think generally, I for this movie, this is not one of his better films for me. It's fine. I enjoyed my time with it, and I think it's stuck at the intersection of David E. Kelley and Bridget Fonda Boulevards.
Well, it's interesting because I'm just kind of scrolling through his list here. I had forgotten that he did Halloween H2O.
Yeah.
Which I had fun with.
He's done episodes of TV shows that I really like. His episode Insane in the Pea Brain for Eureka was fantastic. Like, he's very, very, and Psych, Talk Derby to Me was another. I mean, that was just one of the great episodes of the show. So he can do so much.
Yeah, I mean, he's done a variety of horror properties, but also like the horror comedy stuff and just, dramas, comedies. Like his work is really across the board, and so it's interesting to kind of look at what he did. And I haven't seen a lot of his films, but in general, I think I probably like them more than you do.
Well, maybe. He did a lot of Dawson's Creek, or some Dawson's Creek, a couple of practice episodes. At least we know where he kind of fell into path with David E. Kelley. Anyway, Friday the 13th Part 2, Friday the 13th Part 3, and House, his first 3 feature directed projects. Yep. And great stuff. He's also in the airplane. He is. Movie.
He's the pilot, right?
Yeah.
He was not involved in any of the sequels. I mentioned the sequels briefly, but Lake Placid 2, 3, the 4th one was just called The Final Chapter, and then of course Lake Placid versus Anaconda, which we talked about last time, and then Lake Placid Legacy, which largely is considered kind of a new standalone film. It's not kind of in the line of the others, but generally they're all taking place here at the lake.
Are they worth? Should I watch them?
I've only watched the second one, and it was terrible. It felt very straight to video, and it was like not even at the quality of Anaconda 2 or Anaconda's Hunt for the Blood Orchid, which, I mean, that was a theatrical release. These have all been straight to video, and it felt very straight to video.
Okay.
So after I watched the second of each of them, I was like, I don't need to really watch the rest of them.
But I'm sure it nailed those awards, right?
Well, you'd think, but I think it was funny. It didn't even get nominated for like Razzies or anything. Like it really just hit nothing. There was not a single award that I could find. So
that fits my viewing of it. There's one before we talk about the numbers. I didn't mention one more name, which was John Ottman behind the music. What'd you think of the score? Because Ottman has done some great work. He's
done great work, and he's also an interesting composer in that he also works as an editor. So, and I think that's an interesting thing about him. He's just been all over the place with the types of films he does. He had been Bryan Singer's guy since the beginning. They had been working together. And I really, really think that he's a strong composer, does some beautiful stuff in the scores he does. And in this particular film, he didn't have anything to do with the editing here, but his music, I think, worked really well. And the crocodile, we've been talking about their noises. We didn't bring that up at all, but the crocodile just makes crocodile noises in general. But the music has this really deep, like it takes the music really low on a real low register. And then sometimes it'll bring in like the plucked strings and everything for the crocodile. And I thought it worked really well to kind of play up kind of just a horror feel to it. I didn't like the music sting that we get when the beaver jumps out and freaks the guy out at the beginning. Other than that, though, I think it all works pretty well.
In the spirit of ripoffs versus remakes versus, homage, I know that we can call the parallels to Jaws, all day long if we wanted. But I think what I loved the most about there's a haunting score or a haunting sort of element at the end when we're waiting for the crocodile to do something after the helicopters crashed. And it goes into like the croc theme, and it uses the same notes as the Jaws theme, da 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 da. But it's just they're just used really, really slow.
Yeah,
and so you kind of have to pick it apart. But there's no way that's not Ottman intentional right there. I thought it was just too great. It really is clever.
Very, very much so. Very much so.
All right, let's talk about the box office.
Well, Miner's film cost either $27 million or $35 million, depending on your sources. A little confusing. I'm going to just assume it's the latter and that the difference is the cost of prints and advertising because, sometimes they just don't say that. That means that it cost $53.9 million in today's dollars. The movie was released July 16th, 1999, opposite Kubrick's Eyes Wide Shut, The Wood, The Blair Witch Project, and Muppets from Space. Quite a variety that weekend. This opened in fourth place behind Eyes Wide Shut, American Pie in its second week, and Big Daddy in its fourth. It never did go higher than that, but it did slow down over its run and ended up making $31.7 million domestically and $25.1 million internationally for a total in today's dollars of $87.6 million. That gives it an adjusted profit per finished minute of $411,000. Still profitable, but not as much as some of our others.
Well, Andy, I don't know that you've helped all that much. I really enjoyed talking about it. I'm so glad to have watched it again. It totally fits in our Aquatic Killers series. I think I'm still as conflicted as I was when we started.
Glad I could help.
Yeah, you've helped. Exactly zero. You want to take it to the mat?
Let's do it.
Head over to flickchart.com/thenextreel. You'll see all the movies we've talked about on this show. If you swipe over in your show notes and tap the word Flickchart, it should take you straight to this movie in the Flickchart catalog where you can add it to your list and see how it stacks up against ours.
First up, we have Lake Placid, or Il Postino the Postman.
Yeah. It's Il Postino.
I'm going to tell you, Pete, I still really enjoy Lake Placid. I think after our conversation, my rating of it and my feelings about it have dropped a little bit. Okay. And I probably would, on my own chart, put this over The Postman because it's just something I'm going to return to more often. Guilty pleasure. I have a great time with it. Problems and all. But that's for fair. Our purposes here, I am going to put The Postman down because I do think it is actually the better film.
Okay, good. I mean, I'm relieved.
But I'm not always going to do that. So just be forewarned.
No, you're a real mystery.
Lake Placid or Nikita?
Nikita.
I'll say Nikita. Lake Placid or Say Anything. Oh, I'll say Anything.
Okay, Say Anything. We had issues, Andy. But
we do have issues. We do have issues. Lake Placid or The Little Drummer Girl.
Lake Placid. God.
Lake Placid.
God, if we could have Lake Placid versus The Little Drummer Girl.
Lake Placid or The Best Little Whorehouse in Texas.
Lake Placid.
Lake Placid, indeed. Lake Placid or Yee, a 1 and a 2.
Lake Placid.
Yee.
Oh, Andy, this is the one?
Why is Yee so low on our chart?
Are you ready?
I'm ready. Here we go. One, two, three. Scissors. Well, Lake Placid takes it.
All right.
Lake Placid or Amour? I'll take Lake Placid, please.
Take Lake Placid. Sorry, Michael.
Lake Placid or Near Dark? I'll take Lake Placid.
Really? Is it hard at all?
Nope.
Oh, all right. Well,
I was like Placid, a little middling under. Yeah. It's a really interesting film. Lake Placid or Giant? I'll take Lake Placid.
Yeah, Giant. I mean, Lake Placid.
You can watch Lake Placid easily twice in the time you get through Giant. Well, that puts Lake Placid on our chart at 416. 416 out of 474. Pretty low. That's about a 12%.
Wow. Okay. Well, I also ranked it, and 12%. Man, I'm much higher than that. You'll be pleased to know how to do on your chart.
I ended up at 989 out of 4497, which is about a 78%, Pete.
78%. That is actually higher than mine. I ended up at 735 out of 1472. That is a 50%. Straight down the middle for Lake Placid. And if I go by the algorithm at letterboxd.com/thenextreel, that should be a 2.5 star right down the middle. And you know what? I'm going to give it that 2.5 star. And I'm also going to give it a heart.
Aw.
Yeah, I know.
2.5 stars with a heart. I was at a 3. When I watched this in February, I gave it 4 stars, 4 out of 5. I really enjoyed this movie. On my recent watch, and this is, I suppose, a recency thing, I was like, there were some more issues in here that I wasn't noticing so much the first time. I was really looking at it, and it just struck me like, there's a lot of problems I have. I don't drop it a whole lot. I'm dropping it just a little bit. I'm going down to 3.5 with a heart. Because I definitely don't think it's a 4-star film anymore. I was a little surprised that I was so praised it so effusively that first time, but I still really enjoy it. So I'm okay at a 3.5 with a heart because I think there's a lot of fun stuff in here. So that leaves it with an average of 3 and a heart.
All right, there we go. That's the end of Lake Placid.
That is the end of Lake Placid.
We now have crocodiles and octopuses and piranhas.
Anaconda.
And
saltwater crocodile.
Saltwater crocodile. What?
Plus a great white shark.
Plus a bonus great white shark from the past. What, pray tell, new entry will we have next week?
We are now jumping into the ocean, and we've been on dry land here since Tentacles, really. And we're going to be looking at a whale. We're going to be jumping into the sperm whale territory. We're going to be looking at Ron Howard's story that theoretically inspired Moby Dick, In the Heart of the Sea from 2015.
This one has a little bit of a different tone to it.
Yes, supposedly it's a biopic.
Of who?
You were asking me about which one took it more seriously?
Yeah.
It's this one, Pete.
It's this one. It's a biopic of a whale. Get ready, everybody. When the movie ends.
Our conversation begins.
Amazon giveth, Andrew.
As Amazon always doeth.
And Amazon, in fact, giveth this week. We did not stray from our patronage of Amazon.
I would just like to point out 76% of the people give it 5 stars.
Yeah. That's notable. You should think about that when you like.
I feel like, okay, I'm not alone in my love for this movie.
All right. I think you should go ahead. You're starting high.
All right, I am. I'm actually starting with a 5-star review by Timothy W., who says it's extremely underrated. Any reviews less than 4 stars, and you can go ahead and count that vote out. The only people who don't enjoy this movie probably work for Rotten Tomatoes, the worst movie critic company of all time. This is not art, and there is no grand hidden meaning. It's a huge crock eating people with some pretty good humor sprinkled all over. This is entertainment. Love this movie.
Okay. All right. Well, you've got a real
Rotten Tomatoes, Pete. Don't trust them.
I don't know what they were reviewing here.
The worst movie critic company of all time.
It is a movie critic company. I think that I'm really torn. But I think I'm going to go with this 2-star from Joe, who says Lake Placid. Lake Flaccid is more like it. You see what happened there? He used a penis joke to start his review.
Of course.
From all the hideous reviews this film has garnered, I wasn't expecting much when I rented it. I popped it in the DVD player and actually was enjoying it. I mean, come on. The opening sequence of the film is great. We see a foolish diver get bitten in 2. The movie's only 3 minutes in, and we've already got one of the most gruesome-looking killings in a horror movie. I was even enjoying the obviously lame dialogue exchanges between the highly underwritten cardboard characters. But then I noticed something. No one's dying. One other guy gets his head bitten clean off. Hello. Where's the gore, the scares, the attacks? Besides that, we don't even hate the crocodile like we hated Jaws the shark. We feel sympathy for the poor creature and don't give a flip about the goofball dorks hunting him down. The movie finally ends at a paltry 80 minutes. Not only does it have hardly any attacks, it's the shortest movie I think I've seen. Well, I think that honor might go to Halloween H2O, which coincidentally also directed by this film's guy, Steve Miner. Kudos to the special effects team, though. I've never been more convinced that a creature was alive. The croc really looked real, but the abrupt ending, poor writing, lack of attacks, and cheesy acting sink this croc to the bottom of the barrel. Crocs in a barrel, Andy. Good Lord, that would be horrible.
We didn't mention that there were a lot of red shirts in here.
So many red shirts.
They could have killed a few more red shirts off, I think.
The opportunity to end shark hunger as we know it through all these red shirts. Thanks, Amazon. It's hard to believe we have been having in-depth weekly conversations about movies since 2011.
You're telling me producing this show week after week is so much fun, but it does require a lot of work behind the scenes. If you'd like to help support our efforts, one easy way is by using our originals page when shopping for books and movies that we've covered.
Your purchase is made through our links Give us a small commission at no extra cost to you, and allow us to keep having these great discussions.
We covered a lot of great movies that were adapted from other material in Season 10.
Our originals page at thenextreel.com/originals is where listeners can purchase the source material behind all our adapted film discussions. It helps support the show at no extra cost when you buy through our links.
In our foreign language Best Picture nominees series, we looked at several adaptations, including Z, The Postman Il Postino, Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, and Letters from Iwo Jima.
We hit the high seas with In the Heart of the Sea from Nathaniel Philbrick's nonfiction book for our Aquatic Killers series.
Definitely a weaker entry in that series.
I bet the book is better.
Oh, me too.
Member bonus episodes featured adaptations like Gone Girl, The Russia House, Ivanhoe, The Hot Rock, The Big Heat, and Naked Lunch.
Oliver Stone brought not just original stories, but also adaptations like Conan the Barbarian, Scarface, Year of the Dragon, 8 Million Ways to Die, Talk Radio, and Born on the 4th of July.
Mary Herron's disturbingly insightful American Psycho was adapted from the Bret Easton Ellis book.
You like Huey Lewis in the News?
Oh my God, it even has a watermark.
And of course, more Stephen King with The Mist, The Green Mile, and The Shawshank Redemption for our King a la Darabont series.
Find links to all of these books and more adapted films on our originals page. That's thenextreel.com/originals. Every purchase supports our show.
Get the full list of books that we've talked about and start your next read today at thenextreel.com/originals.